The winter meetings have begun, and the Mets have made a signing. Unfortunately, it's not a big one, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. You're watching Mets Daily. I'm your host, Jake Brown. Make sure you smash that thumbs up on this video, hit that subscribe button, hit that share button, and follow me at Jake Brown Live on X, Instagram, and TikTok. And go subscribe to my YouTube at Jake Brown Live. It is Monday, December 8th, 2025. We're coming off Friday's show, the most viewed show in Mets Daily history, over 10,000 views. So thank you so much. Keep on watching, keep on hitting those thumbs up, and keep on commenting. We'll read your comments later from Friday's show as well. On this day last year, if you remember, winter meetings kicking off, and the New York Mets signed Juan Soto to that 15-year, $765 million deal. It doesn't feel like we're going to get anything similar when it comes to starting pitching. Reports are that the Mets right now are hesitant to give long-term deals to starting pitchers. And listen, I don't completely disagree with this philosophy, but this was a philosophy that we saw last year with the Mets, and look what happened to the starting pitching. They crumbled. And that's not saying it's going to happen again, but what it is saying is if you want to get the best starting pitching, you're going to have to pay. You're not going to get many starting pitching on this market, especially with a potential impending lockout in 2027. You're not going to get them in short-term deals. You know, a guy like Mike Soroka, he signed today with the Arizona Diamondbacks to a one-year deal. You're not going to get that when it comes to guys like Framber Valdez. You know, even if you do go trade for Skubal, well, guess what? Next winter, you're going to have to give Skubal $400 million in a long-term deal. So if the Mets want to be serious about addressing this starting pitching, I'm sorry, you're going to have to go out there and get one long-term guy. I understand the approach, but, and I'm not saying you spend like drunken sailors because you got Steve Cohen money, but you do need to when it comes to an elite starting pitcher. I mean, the market just is not in a position where you're going to go out and get an ace. Like, yeah, if you trade for Skubal, yeah, if you trade for Peralta, but then are you changing your mind next year with a potential lockout impending next year? It feels like there's less of a chance that they change their mind next year when they're not positive if there's going to be a season in 2027. So I don't necessarily agree with this. And, you know, this is a report. Who knows? Cohen could step in and say, hey, let's sign Framber Valdez to a 6-year, $200 million deal, which, by the way, I don't think, if Framber Valdez goes anywhere but the Mets, I don't think we could ever trust Hector Gomez again, because that was like 2 weeks ago or a week ago, whenever it was, and we've had nothing heard on Framber Valdez since then when he said the Mets were the favorites to land him. Well, if this philosophy is true, it doesn't feel like the Mets are getting Framber Valdez or anyone of that ilk. And I don't know. I understand David Stearns wanting to be frugal in some aspects and build this team right, but you have to address starting pitching. And the Mets have a lot of arms, but they don't have that frontline guy that you throw out there in game one of the playoffs who's giving you 7 innings. Right now, if you look, it's probably Nolan McLean. You're putting all your weight on a guy who's going to be in the Rookie of the Year running in 2026 since he didn't pitch the qualifying innings in 2025, which is great. But, like, is that what you want to put all your bread in the basket for? Him? Senga, if he doesn't get traded? Manaea, who broke down last year? Clay Holmes, who by the time September comes, he's not going to be any more than a 4 to 5 inning guy. You need innings eaters, and unfortunately, you got to pay top dollar to get one of them. So one of them you might not have to if the Mets want to go this route, which is a little bit riskier, is a guy like Michael King. Now, Michael King is a free agent. You know, he has had injury concerns in his career, and I think that's the worry when it comes to Michael King is he going to be healthy enough for the long term that he would make sense? I feel like Michael King is probably on the top of the Mets' radar. I feel like if you said to me now, based on what you're hearing, who do the Mets sign in free agency? Michael King is the first name that comes to my head. You've heard me mention him before because of the fact that I don't think a team is giving Michael King 5 or 6 years. But I could see the Mets signing Michael King to, let's say, a 3-year, $60 million deal. I could very much see that happening. King, though, has only pitched in one full season. In 2024, he had 30 starts. 2025, 15. 2023, he was a reliever. Mostly made 9 starts. 2022, he was a reliever. 2021, he was mostly a reliever for the Yankees. So he's only had 2 full years where he's been a starting pitcher, and one of them he was hurt in this year with 15 starts. So listen, if you go off what he did in 2023, 2024, then yeah, Michael King deserves to be paid decently. he deserves probably a 3-year to 54, 3-year, $60 million deal. And I think that's where the Mets go. But again, it's a risk. Manaea, you gave 3 for 75. He was hurt last year. I think he's due for a bounce back. Michael King maybe due for a bounce back after dealing with injuries last year. But when you're looking at who's getting a short-term deal on this free agent market, there's very few names in my mind. Like maybe Merrill Kelly is a guy that Mets. He's a 1-year, 2-year guy. Michael King's the one guy I see where he might end up a Met. So that's something to monitor. But that's one of the targets. He's coming off an injury-plagued year where he missed over 2 months of action due to right shoulder inflammation. He was knocked out from late May until early August with the injury, and he spent additional time on the IL due to knee inflammation from mid-August to early September. So that's a pretty big bulk of the season where Michael King was out. Now, he posted a 3.44 ERA. He did a solid job, but he pitched 73 innings. The Mets can't afford a guy like King. If they're going to give him 3 years and $60 million, they cannot afford him missing significant time like that. Because if he does, you're going to hear people like me, you're going to hear all content creators, you're going to hear fans saying, Stearns, how did he not go and pay elite starting pitching? And that's what I worry with Michael King. I think he's a really good pitcher, but the injuries do concern me with him. Now, I'm fine giving him a short-term deal, but if that's your big free agent move or, that's your big starting pitching addition, I think heads are going to roll amongst the Mets fan base. Not a big signing, but the Mets have made a signing here as we record this at 11 a.m. on Monday morning. They've signed right-hand pitcher Carl Edwards Jr. to a minor league deal. Now, you've probably heard his name before. Edwards has pitched in the big leagues for 11 seasons with 8 teams to a career 3.56 ERA. I do like, now it's a while ago, that he is a World Series champion. Carl Edwards Jr. did break the Cubs streak, the curse of the Billy Goat in 2016, winning a World Series with the Cubs, where he did pitch in 6 1/3 innings to a 2.84 ERA. Now, listen, that was about a decade ago now, but he's been in the league a while. Obviously after that, he got to the playoffs with the Cubs in 2016, 2017. Hasn't been to the playoffs since. So I'm sure this guy, towards the back end of his career, is craving a playoff spot. But that many years in the league, he's still just 34, which isn't crazy. He's doesn't have a ton of time left in his career, but he's 34. He pitched just 6 innings in the big leagues for the Angels and Rangers last year. 2024, he pitched no innings. He gave up 1 hit. So 2024, he was out with injuries and was in the minor leagues. And 2022 and 2023, he was good. 2022 with the Nationals, 2.76 ERA in 62 innings, 3.69 ERA with the Nationals. In 2023, 31 2/3 innings. So Carl Edwards Jr. is a depth addition. Again, I don't want to really hear comments, stingy Stearns. He is a back-end guy. Like, he probably won't make the team out of camp. He does have a spring training invite to MLB camp. So, listen, if he crushes spring training, he could probably be the last guy on the roster, potentially, but I wouldn't go nuts. I know people, like, when they signed Dickie Lovely, that was a major league deal. That was kind of unnecessary, but I wouldn't really get angry over signing Carl Edwards Jr. I actually think this is a good depth addition because the guy is proven. 11 seasons in the big leagues to the tune of a 3.56 ERA. That's pretty damn good for a reliever that's been around that while, that long. Relievers, it's a crapshoot. And he's dealt with injuries. It's been a bit of a crapshoot in his career. He was mostly in the minors last year where he pitched 50 2/3 innings, a 4.44 ERA, so not a great year in the minor leagues last year. But Carl Edwards Jr., a depth addition, and we'll see if he's on this major league team. I'm sure a guy goes down, he is going to be the guy that gets called up. Don't hate the move, but obviously not that exciting when we're thinking about winter meetings. Can the Mets do something? Wake up. So not exciting, but obviously we have to report it and talk about it. So Carl Edwards Jr. to the Mets. All right, let's read your comments from Friday's show. The most viewed show in Mets daily history, 10,000 plus views with my old co-host Nelson Figueroa. So if you missed it, check it out. I really enjoyed with Figgy talking about that dynamic of the Latin players, the white guys, the different guys in different cliques, because Figgy is Puerto Rican. The Puerto Rican-Dominican dynamic, there is division amongst these people from different countries. It's like when you throw a bunch of people together who have come from completely different backgrounds, you can't expect them to be besties. And I think a lot of people expect that. Just because they're making millions and millions, it doesn't mean they're going to be best friends. There are egos in play. Lindor's got a big ego. Soto's got a big ego. Alonso got a big ego. That's a white guy, Dominican and Puerto Rican. You can say as much as you want. Don't get race involved. But say that in real life and you look like an idiot because it is involved. It's involved in everything. So you're not going to have guys. Now, some of them, interweb and they do get along, but you can't expect guys who have completely different backgrounds, families, lifestyles, and Soto and Lindor have completely different lifestyles for the most part. You can't expect them to be hugs and kisses on and off the field. So, again, that was a nothing burger story. I don't think there's an issue, but I do think they need the right clubhouse pieces. And Marcus Semien was a start. Winners, right clubhouse, even a Carl Edwards Jr. This guy has a ring on his finger. I think the Mets do need players, no matter how long ago, when it was, that have been at the top of the mountain. They don't have those guys. They have a bunch of losers. And I'm not calling them losers as people, but they're losing baseball players. All they've seen is losing. Carl Edwards Jr. at least sniffed the trophy. He was part of a World Series championship team and had success in the playoffs on a World Series championship team, just like Marcus Semien did. So, and that was more recent. So I think the Mets need those winning breed of players. They did that in terms of the coaching staff. They brought in coaches who come from winning programs. They have to do that with their roster, and that's clearly something that they're looking at when they're thinking about who they're bringing in. That's why I think bringing in someone like a Cody Bellinger, who everyone wants right now, is a big deal. Another big story from winter meetings, the Pirates, they're basically just putting this out there so they don't put a salary floor in Major League Baseball. They're saying the Pirates offered Kyle Schwarber a deal. The Pirates are, in the neighborhood or in the hunt for Pete Alonso. That's them saying, hey, we'll give offers. They'll give 4 years, $100 million offer to Kyle Schwarber. There's no world where he accepts that. So it's all fun and games until I see a big name signed for a multi-year deal with the Pittsburgh Pirates. All that is fluff, and it's not a story when it comes to the Pirates. I don't expect them signing any massive deals like an Alonso or a Schwarber. All right, comments from Friday's show from Buddha Approved. December 14th is Hanukkah, brother. Thank you for that. That is, what is that? Next Sunday is the start of Hanukkah. So we'll have 8 days of Hanukkah. Maybe we'll do something Hanukkah-themed for next week's show when it comes to the Mets. And hopefully by next week we have some signings. Listen, winter meetings, I expect something to happen. I expect when we're back tomorrow and Tuesday, the Mets did something more than another minor league deal with someone like Carl Edwards Jr. From ATC Guy 1973, if Pete wants to be a Met, he needs to personally call David Stearns and say, hey, David, this is Pete calling on behalf of Pete. Pete wants to play baseball for the New York Mets forever. Yeah, guys, I know Pete says this, and I love to be a Met. I love representing the city. This is a business. All Pete cares about right now is getting the biggest bag. And that's not to say he doesn't care about his time with the Mets, but if the Mets offered less money than the Red Sox, less years than the Red Sox, he's going to the Red Sox. And listen, his wife has a say in things. They're having a child. They hang out a lot together, obviously. And that's his rock. And his rock is from Boston. They met when Pete Alonso was playing in the Cape Cod Baseball League. Their love began in Boston. So their love can continue in Boston if the Red Sox give Pete Alonso a 5-year deal, which reports out there say it doesn't feel like anyone's giving him a 5-year deal. But if they give 4 and an option and the Mets give 3, you're going to see Pete Alonso back in Cape Cod with his wife. That's the reality. That Jersey Texan says 5 years for Diaz is crazy. I don't think it's crazy. He's the best closer in the game. I mean, Edwin Diaz is far above and beyond anyone else. And the Mets have checked in on Fairbanks. They've checked in on Suarez, 2 names that we've consistently talked about on here, where the Mets will go next if they don't sign Edwin Diaz. But the reality is Edwin Diaz does deserve 5 years. I disagree with that. I don't think in all instances, to me, I don't think Pete deserves 5 years. Because back, he's going to age poorly. He's 30, he just turned 31 or 32. That I don't, I think Pete deserves a lot of money per year, but I don't think he deserves as much. Pete just turned 31. So happy birthday to Pete Alonso yesterday. But I do think Diaz deserves the 5. And listen, someone's going to give it. If the Mets don't, someone's going to step in and give it. I'd be a little bit surprised. I think Edwin meets in the middle, and he gets 4 for 88. And maybe he gets a 5th-year player option for $20 million. But they got to find a way to get this done. Because if you have Edwin Diaz, Devin Williams, A.J. Minter, Brooks Raley, it's a lot better bullpen than what it would be without him. From A.J. Sosa Garcia, I prefer Carson Benjamin in center field. Bellinger in left. Pitcher that we may have to pay attention to is Mackenzie Gore. Super young, and a team like the Mets, I make a trade. Yeah, I mean, listen, I think if the Mets sign Bellinger, he plays left because they don't want to throw Benj in center immediately. I think Benj, from all I've read, portrays better as a left fielder. So I don't know how the Mets would configure that, but maybe they put him in left and they start Tyrone Taylor in center for the first month and then get Benj up here. But we'll see. Mackenzie Gore, yes, that is a name that has come up. I didn't bring it up today. Maybe we'll talk about him on tomorrow's show. If that's your big addition this offseason, I hate it. I think he's a good pitcher. I don't think he should be your headline grab when it comes to starting pitching. And Michael King, you could argue, is not that either. But I think Mackenzie Gore is a nice piece. But the Mets have some nice pieces. Do they want to go out and get another nice piece? It feels like if they go get Mackenzie Gore, then they're going to trade away Kodai Senga. Is Mackenzie Gore that much better than Kodai Senga? Maybe a little bit. He's maybe younger, better. I don't know. So I like Mackenzie Gore, but again, I'm big fish hunting here. The Mets have nice pieces. They need an ace. They need a frontline guy. And Mackenzie Gore for the Nationals was a frontline guy. Is he the frontline guy on a team contending for a championship? Probably not. From actor Brendan Crash Burt, respectfully, there's no scenario where the Mets are better off without Pete than with. Bregman's a third baseman. That makes Vientos a first baseman, a Beatty DH. Bellinger has our best center fielder playing first, and our Ryan Clifford swing is about a half hour long. Yeah, booed. Remember, took over Strawberry. Yeah, me neither. I mean, listen, if the Mets get Bellinger, he is a very suitable replacement of Pete Alonso. Bellinger probably would end up being your first baseman. Ryan Clifford, I didn't mention Ryan Clifford 2026. I think Ryan Clifford is more of a 2027 guy. That's if you went shorter term at first base. I don't see any world where the Mets actually are playing Mark Vientos at first base, and I don't see the Mets in on Bregman, because remember, they also have Ronnie Mauricio, who's crushing balls in winter ball, by the way. Hit a walk-off homer yesterday. So I don't know. I don't think the Mets are in on Bregman. I don't think Vientos ends up on this team. I do think Beatty is probably the starting third baseman. Maybe it's Beatty and Mauricio at third base. I do think they end up trading Luis Angel Acuna, but I think it's going to be Beatty and Mauricio staying. I think Vientos and Acuna are the ones that go. Yes, obviously, almost anyone's a downgrade from Pete, but if you're upgrading at multiple positions of weakness, it's a plus. Because listen, I don't want to keep hating on Pete. The Mets have won nothing with Pete Alonso. I'm not blaming him, but he's been here for a very long time. His worst season was the Mets' best season. They can win without Pete Alonso. I'm telling you, there's a world the Mets can exist without him. And listen, as much as I've said no to Pete, if you're telling me the Mets got Pete on a 2-year deal, I say welcome him back. It's about the long-term Pete Alonso situation where you want flexibility to go to someone like Clifford. At some point, at some positions, guys, you're going to have cheaper internal players. The Mets are already doing it with the pitching staff, saying they're not going to give a long-term deal. Well, listen, you can't give a long-term deal at every position. You have a long-term guy at shortstop right now. You have a long-term guy at right field. You have Simeon for a good price for the next 3 years. You can't have a $30 million player at every position. It's just not feasible. From Elliot Manangas, don't agree about Nimmo. You could lead by example, and he always represented well to the media. Yes, he was laid back, but he was a presence. Mets should have seen to bring J.D. Martinez back as hitting coach, well-respected. I agree on J.D. Martinez. He may not want to have done that. Guys retire. They don't want to just take a potential pay cut to be a hitting coach. We don't know what he wanted. We don't know if the Mets addressed him. He's also never coached, so we don't know if J.D. Martinez has any interest. I think people are just saying that, but you can't force a guy to come for, a couple $100,000 when they don't want to commit that time, and they'd rather commit time to their family than make money they can maybe make doing something else. Nimmo, I don't think he was a presence. Yes, he was great with the media. I don't think he was this integral presence. He was a smiling guy, a likable guy. He wasn't a clubhouse presence for the Mets. He just wasn't. You can't put that out there because he was good to the media and a nice guy. He just wasn't. You don't have a team meeting and say nothing if you're a clubhouse presence. You say something. He said nothing. That's alarming. Mr. Nobody 2187. You think losing Alonso is better than losing Diaz? 120, 130 less RBIs versus a good closer. Lets guys walk the bases behind him. I don't know, dude. This is about the drop-off. The drop-off from Diaz to the next guy is bigger than the drop-off from Alonso to the next guy. It just is. If you get a Cody Bellinger and you address multiple positions and upgrade, It's not the end of the world that the Mets lost Pete. If you go from a Diaz to a Pete Fairbanks, and it's Fairbanks, Devin Williams versus Alonso, Williams, Raley, Minter, it's a critically different bullpen. And you saw the pitching staff crumble for the Mets. It wasn't the offense, it was the pitching staff. And as much as it sounds crazy to you, the drop-off just is far more significant, guys, when it comes to closer than it is at first base if the Mets take care of multiple positions. It just is. It's a lot of people just look at homers and RBIs. All I got to say to that is look at what the Toronto Blue Jays did. Look at their lineup. Look at their statistics offensively, and then get back to me. And look where they went. They were a IKF two-step more lead from winning a championship. That's on them. But they went to Game 7 of the World Series against the Avengers, the juggernaut, Los Angeles Dodgers, with a ragtag bunch that didn't put up a boatload of home runs and RBIs. And that's the model the Mets need to build off. It was a top-heavy team. They need to get less top-heavy and more full production from 1 to 9. They didn't get that. All right, last one from BX Dadoff. Figgy, let's go Amity Baseball. Great playing with you back in the day in Brooklyn. A couple of Amity Baseball comments. There you go. Yes, Figgy is from Brooklyn. He went to Lincoln High School. So, yes. I guess he did play at Amity Baseball. He did play in Brooklyn. There's some comments about feeding the family. Guys, that is not taken literally. A very expensive expression for an everyday regular dude coming from an already millionaire player. It's not actually feeding the family. It's just an expression. We don't actually mean it. It's not meant to be disrespectful. Oh, he makes $100 million. Of course he could feed his family. He could buy an island. It's just an expression that's not meant to be taken literally. I think a lot of people take things, especially just in this world, way too literally. Sometimes you got to have some fun. All right, folks, winter meetings continue tomorrow. Hopefully we have some more news better than the Mets signing Carl Edwards to a minor league deal. Talk about happy Juan Soto anniversary. We're wearing the Juan Soto shirt. Congrats to Jeff Kent, by the way. Started his career with the Mets, 5 seasons with the Mets. He gets into the Baseball Hall of Fame. At this point, it feels like everyone's getting in. Good career, 377 career homers over 17 years. I know he wasn't well beloved by the media. He had a nice career, so congrats to Jeff Kent. I don't know a ton about Jeff Kent, the person. I didn't watch a ton of Jeff Kent, but a good player, and congrats to him getting the Hall of Fame. Congrats to you for getting through this whole show if you made it to the end. If you did, keep on subscribing. Keep smashing that thumbs up. Follow me at Jake Brown Live, and we will talk to you tomorrow right here on Mets Daily. Thanks for watching.